The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Tipton, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I come at this from a slightly different view than what we have here on the panel. You point to very important issues in a lot of our metropolitan areas. I happen to represent rural Colorado. And rural America is often forgotten in this conversation. On a per capita basis, often when you look into our communities, which typically have lower incomes, we probably on a per capita basis maybe have a bigger problem on that per capita basis than a lot of our urban neighbors do. Frequently talk to a lot of the hardworking folks in our district, and just given some of the challenges that we face there in terms of property costs, in terms of some of the rules and regulations, not from the federal government, but are compounded at the city, the county, and the state level, we're seeing increasing costs that address a number of the concerns actually as a cost driver that we're pointing at in terms of some of the funding. Toured one facility that was building affordable housing in Glenwood Springs. The cost is $380,000 per unit. Where I come from, that's expensive. And it's going to be labeled as affordable housing to be able to actually achieve that. And so I think we've got, through those regulatory processes, something that we do need to be able to define if we're going to be able to get some of those costs down. I think Ms. Gass, you pointed to some good leveraging of dollars to be able to expand in Austin from, I think you said 156 to 400 plus units that you were able to actually see expand. But I would like to be able to get maybe just a sense of, is RAD a good program that came in under the Obama administration and maybe needs some tweaks to be able to follow through with? What are your thoughts? Would you label it as a good program?
It has been very good for Austin.
Okay. Mr. Jones, what's your sense?
It has been a very good program for the agencies that I've worked with from Chicago. Land is doing that right now, and some other places. Again, Congressman, I think it's one size does not fit all. They really have to look at the opportunity that they have right now, and it's just an alternative. It's not that you have to do a RAD in these larger housing authorities, because they do have capital funding available to fix those elevators, fix those chillers, and those types of big ticket items and so forth. But I think based on your portfolio, your physical needs assessments and so forth, it tells you what you need to do at what period of time and how do you go over the next 5 to 10 years. But it is a good program.
Well, and I think that's something, every one of us know, $23 trillion debt in the country. There are not a lot of available resources that we're going to be able to dip into. And so what's your assessment maybe of the private-public partnerships? Is this opportunity to be able to create a win-win?
Say that again, Congressman.
With private-public partnerships in terms of affordable housing, is that an opportunity to be able to create a win-win where we aren't necessarily always using just taxpayer dollars, but getting that private investment to come in? Is that a
Absolutely.
desirable?
Yes, absolutely.
Of course. What do you think, Ms. Waltz?
With sufficient tenant protections and with the opportunity to ensure that all PHAs, not just medium-sized and large PHAs or PHAs in metropolitan areas, are able to attract that private capital. And so there needs to be some re-envisioning of the RAD program so that it's a bigger universe of PHAs that are eligible and able to secure that private capital. And I think just to your point about rural America, Congressman, I'll just say that the hard units are especially critical in rural America, where it's very hard to use a housing choice voucher. In Cairo, Illinois, it was about as rural as you could get on the southern tip of Illinois. Residents had to move at least 50 miles to find a property owner who would take their housing choice voucher.
Yeah. And frankly, in our district, part of it is the regulatory ends of it, not my backyard, to be able to address that. Mr. Jones, one other issue I'd like to be able to hit on, it struck me when you talked about the holistic approach We have PHAs in my district, and they deal with literacy training for financial issues, healthcare, their costs, parental guidance, and whatnot. Should we be looking at that whole picture in terms of getting people really to the point where they will hopefully not need to be able to have low-income assistance?
Absolutely. We need a holistic approach because that adds to the success of any public housing in their city, in their jurisdiction, and so forth. So if you piecemeal it and you do onesies and so forth, it's not going to get there.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. At this time, we